This is test 2 review still, and we're doing problems 20 and 21, and we're going to determine whether the pair of fractions is equivalent or not equivalent. So does this fraction 7/8 equal 15/16? So let's take a look at that. Alright, what I want to cover is the concept first with basic, with some easier fractions. So if we have 3/4, we're going to ask ourselves, does 3/4 equal 6/8? So we're going to draw 3/4. And 6/8. You can see from these pictures that 3/4 is the same as 6/8. So these fractions are equivalent. However, I want to show you what the concept is. In order to illustrate that 3/4 does in fact equal 6/8, when you show them on separate pies, but what you're really doing is you're saying, I am cutting this piece in half, so I'm going to cut them all in half so that I will have all equivalent pieces, and this way you can make a correct comparison. If you were to cut one of these pieces into thirds and these pieces in half, these pieces over here are going to not be the same size. So it's always having to cut each piece by the same amount. And what that means mathematically is that whatever you did to make 6 pieces, so if I cut each of these in half, I'm multiplied by 2, and I made 6 pieces. Then the denominator, then the exact same thing will happen to the denominator. You have to multiply by 2, or you have to cut everything in half, essentially. So now you have 6/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's try it with 3/4 and see what other kind of equivalent fraction we can make just by applying the concept of cutting the pieces. So let's, instead of cutting each piece in half evenly, let's cut each piece into thirds. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have 9 pieces. And so that means, what did we do? If we didn't finish cutting it, because we don't have a piece to cut, how do we know what the piece sizes are? Because so you cut each of those pieces into 3, so you 3 times 3, 9, and you have to multiply by the same number on the bottom, so that's 12. So you know that 9/12 equals 3/4. So that's what equivalent fractions are. Again, if you were to start with a pizza, cut it in half, and cut this side into thirds and this side in half, you do not have equal pieces, so it doesn't make sense. Okay, to move to the problem then, 7/8, does 7/8 equal 15/16? The math is, one, you find a least common multiple between the two denominators. Find the least, that's LCM. Find the least common multiple between denominators. In this case, the least common multiple is, well, what you do to find the least common multiple is you take the larger denominator and you say 16 times 1 is 16. Does 8 go into 16? Yes. So you're done. You found the least common denominator is 16. And we'll be doing least common denominator in a bunch of different ways later, but let's just keep it simple for now. The least common denominator is 16, so this fraction does not change. Your goal is to make the denominators equal so you can easily compare fractions. You cannot compare them without making the denominators equal. So 8 times 2 equals 16, so in order to change 7/8 so that it has a 16 in the denominator, I had to multiply 8 by 2, which means I have to multiply the numerator by the same number. And we saw that over here. You have to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number for it to make sense. Okay, so if you have 14/16 is equal to 7/8, and you're going to compare that to 15/16, this is the larger fraction, and they are not equal. You saw, without having to go through the math, without having to do this math, if you saw that 7/8 is 1/8 away from a whole, and 15/16 is 1/16 away from a whole pi, then the fractions cannot be equivalent because an eighth is a larger piece. Okay, if that didn't make sense to you, don't worry about it. Just do the math. Make your denominators have the same number. Now, in this case down here, finding the least common multiple between 110 and 99 is not easy, and there's a better way to do it. Right? Instead, reduce the fractions and then find a least common multiple. So reduce fractions first here. Find the LCM in denominators. You will be finding a least common multiple in denominators when you add and subtract fractions, which is coming up. In the meantime, in order to find equivalent fractions, you have to compare the denominators, or make them equal before you can compare the fractions. We're going to reduce first in this case. So if I reduce this number, I have to figure out a number that can go evenly or divide evenly into 81, and what number can divide evenly into 99. And it has to be the same number. You can't use different numbers. So that's 81 divided by 9 is 9. I have to divide the denominator by 9 if I divided the numerator by 9. So 99 divided by 9 is 11. I chose 9 because I knew it would work, because I know the multiples. Okay, so I reduced 81 99ths and I got 9 11ths. I'm going to reduce 90 over 110, and if you know the trick, what you do is you cross out the zeros, which is the same thing as dividing both the numerator and the denominator by 10. So I've done the math, but just in a quicker way. And then it reduces that fraction to 9 11ths. So what have I done? I know now that they're both equivalent. These fractions are equal. Okay? And we'll be doing more with lowest common denominator. Least common multiple, we'll be doing that because the least common multiple is the same as the least common denominator, and we will be working more with that when we add and subtract fractions. For now, when you compare fractions, make sure you compare fractions that have the same denominator. So you do have to change the fractions to make it work. And in this case, reducing fixed our problems. In this case, we had to find the least common multiple between the denominators, which was 16. So we changed 7/8 to 14/16. And the pictures of how it works is basically that's just saying if you have 3 quarters and you cut each of those quarter slices in half, you will get 6/8. If you cut each of those quarter slices into thirds, then you have 9/12. So 6/8 is the same amount of pizza as 3/4, and 9/12 is the same amount of pizza as 3/4, but these are smaller pieces than these, and these are smaller pieces than these.